Hello, this is the weekly news downdate here with your host, Mr. Emo Syndicate and Mr. Voiceover News Guy. Now, today we're going to be in Johannesburg, Southern Africa. Now, we're going to talk about Rhodesia and their raids on Zambia and Botswana. Now, to give you some brief context and overview. Rhodesia, a country in Southern Africa or Southern Africa, was divided into a big Rhodesia, but has now since become Northern Rhodesia, which has become Zambia, and Southern Rhodesia, which has become Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. Now, the Rhodesian security forces have been fighting a long 10-year war of a bush war against the People's African Zimbabwe Union, or ZANU, and the People's Union of ZAPU. Now, one was headed by Mr. Joshua Nkomo and the other one by Mr. Robert Mugabe. Now, the Rhodesians have now started to have multi-racial voting this week, as you can see in the towns of Salisbury and Zambezi. Now, only time will tell if these votes are actually properly counted or fraudulent. There are 2.5 million black voters to 150,000 white voters, including the security forces on the border of Rhodesia. Since Portugal has left the colonial war and colonies in general, Rhodesia has been surrounded by now Mozambique, Angola, even South Africa secretly, but they're secretly, covertly being funded by South Africa, which still denies it to this day. And of course, they're surrounded by Zambia and Botswana, though having been neutral, are still staging areas, especially in the bushes, for ZANU and ZAPU. Now we take it to Mr. Emo Syndicate on the ground, where he is going through the raids of Mr. Nkomo today, and we'll see something we might not have seen before. Anyway, to you, Mr. Emo Syndicate on the ground. Johannesburg, the 13th of April, 1979. Rhodesia sent raiders into neighboring Zambia and Botswana today to attack command centers of guerrillas who have vowed to disrupt elections in Rhodesia next week. At least 10 people were killed. In a 3 a.m. strike in Lusaka, the Zambian capital, Rhodesian commandos disguised as Zambian soldiers wrecked several buildings in an attack apparently aimed at capturing or killing Joshua Nkomo, one of the two principal Rhodesian guerrilla leaders. A bungalow where Mr. Nkomo lives was destroyed in a raid, but the guerrilla leaders escaped injury. At first, Zambian officials and guerrilla aides said that Mr. Nkomo had not been at home during the attack, but Mr. Nkomo insisted later that he had escaped during a gun battle. No words on Rhodesian casualties. The report that at least 10 people were killed and 12 wounded in the Lusaka raids was made by Zambian officials, but they did not say whether any senior aides of Mr. Nkomo were among the casualties. There were no official words on the Rhodesian losses, but some sources in Salisbury, Rhodesia's capital, said that the raiders returned without casualties. They were ferried across the Zambezi River in Land Rovers on pontoons. Other Rhodesian troops dressed in the uniforms of the Botswana Defense Force, or the BDF, drove into Francistown on the border at 1 a.m. and captured 14 of Mr. Nkomo's aides. The officials were charged of conducting the passage of guerrillas and recruits and even refugees from Rhodesia through Botswana into Zambia. At about the same time, Rhodesian attacks destroyed the ferry that crossed the Zambezi between Botswana and Zambia at Konsongala, the point where Rhodesia, Botswana, and Zambia meet. A Rhodesian military communique issued in Salisbury said that the ferry had been carrying war materials for the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army, the military wing of Mr. Nkomo's Zimbabwe African People's Union, or ZAPU. No comment on objective. A Rhodesian military spokesman refused to say what the principal objectives of the Lusaka raid and attacks were, but it appears to be similar to the raids into Mozambique over the last 3 years, when military units attempted to seize or kill commanders of the other main Rhodesian guerrilla force, which was led by Mr. Robert Mugabe. On each occasion, the raiders struck at camps where they believed guerrilla commanders were present, only to find that their intelligence information had been faulty. There were speculations in Rhodesia today that the attacks in Zambia and Botswana were part of a military offensive, aimed at blunting the guerrilla plans to disrupt the elections for the black-led government scheduled to begin on Tuesday. The election, involving 2.8 million black voters and more than 100,000 whites, are continued and will continue for 5 days under one of the most elaborate security operations ever mounted in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. The latest drive on the guerrillas began last month with a series of raids against the camps and other targets in Zambia and Mozambique. However, military spokesmen have said that the tree bombing raids this week against the targets in Zambia, which left 350 people killed or wounded, had come too late to have any effect on the rebels already inside Rhodesia, preparing to disrupt the vote. A possible motive for today's attacks could have been to demoralize guerrillas and demoralize the guerrillas, led by Mr. Nkomo, and encourage them to defect, as several hundred insurgents have already done under a government amnesty program. Another motive could have been to avenge the death of 107 Rhodesian civilians in the two Air Rhodesia airlines shot down by Mr. Nkomo's forces in the past 6 months. The attack on Lusaka lifted staggered morale amongst the 250,000 Rhodesian whites, some of whom have competed and compared it to the Israeli raid on the Etaba airport 3 years ago. The military command gave very few details, but reports from Lusaka indicates that the raiders were probably members of the Selector or the Salutu Scouts, a unit that operates independently of the army's main force, specialized in assaults across the border. Witnesses in Lusaka said that some of the raiders entered into the Zambian capital in Land Rovers, identical to those used by the Zambian army, and bearing the Zambian markings. Others were reported to have been parachuted onto a golf course close to the Nkomo residence. The attackers were described as blacks, most of whom were the Selector Scouts. Most members of the Selector Scouts were blacks, but whites blackened their face for raids across the border as well. Witnesses said that the raiders were dressed in Zambezi and Zambian uniform. Later, a Zambian official surveyed the remains of Mr. Nkomo's bungalow and pointed that the raiders must have assumed that their barrage of rockets, grenades, and small arms fire would kill the nationalist leader. In recent months, Mr. Nkomo has been altering his overnight stays between the bungalow and other houses in the Zambian capital. But he said that after today's attack that he had been in the bungalow at the time, escaping during the 95-minute gun battle. After wrecking the Nkomo house, the attackers destroyed several residences of the other officials close to the guerrilla leader. They have also destroyed the Liberation Center, an office complex in the Lusaka southern outskirts that hosts the Nkomo wing of the Patriotic Front, whose other wing is headed by Mr. Mugabe. Anyway, I believe that is it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Wow, I actually talked slower and thought it was actually going to be like 15 minutes now, but apparently I'm still talking fast enough. Anyway, don't mind that shit, it's all over. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope it was entertaining for you. Oof, oh man. Anyway, this is the only one I could get today because, well, as you can hear, the cricket's already out. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. 8 minutes to edit a nightly news down date. Not bad, not bad. Anyway, ladies, gentlemen, NB, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. This has been the Emo Syndicate signing out. We'll do the beginning, and as they say, you never met a nice Rhodesian, you never met a nice South African, but long live Zimbabwe. Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something, and when time will tell when the black majority of Rhodesia, which will be called Zimbabwe, will get the breadbasket of Africa, it will only be a time, or no, will they keep the breadbasket of Africa, or will they become the basket case of Africa? Only time will tell in these surmountable odds, as the Zapu and Zanu forces reached into Rhodesia and slowly get into Salisbury. Will they finally have the majority they want? After all, their neighbors are a black majority nation except for South Africa. Will they get the majority government that they so desperately seek? Will they get it? Only time will tell. By next year, we should know. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. This has been me signing out. Ladies, gentlemen, NB, terrible finishing outro side. Learn something. Long live Zambia. No, long live Zimbabwe. There we go. Zambia, Zimbabwe, Zambezi River,